hand of God today? Who sits at the right hand of the Father today? Of course, hopefully you know, it's Jesus Christ. That's who we're referring to here when we talk about the right hand of the Lord. 16, the right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord doeth valiantly. 17, I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord. 18, the Lord hath chastened me sore. I mean, he will, to test his children out, and if you have some correction coming, he will correct you, sometimes in a heavy or a firm but loving way. And again, he will allow you to be tested. But you know what? Let's read the rest of the verse. But he hath not given me over unto death. He'll never allow you to be tested. He'll never allow things to become so hard for you, so hot for you, so bothersome and troublesome for you that you can't overcome it. And you know what? If you can't overcome it, he can. And as is written, I believe, in 1 Corinthians 10:13, that's what it basically says, that there are things that come upon all man. Trials, problems that we face is common to all, but that God will never allow you to be tested or tempted or tried above what you're able to bear. And if it ever does get to be too rough for you, he will always show you a way out, a way to overcome it. And so put your faith in him to carry you through some of that testing and trials, and stay true to him throughout it. Verse 19, open to me the gates of righteousness, I will go into them, and I will praise the Lord. And again, we're as much as David himself was a prophet, we could be looking at the millennial kingdom, the millennial reign of Christ, that first day of the millennium, also going into the eternity. 20, the gate of the Lord into which the righteous shall enter. 21, I will praise thee, for thou hast heard me, and art become my salvation. 22, why I came here. The stone which the builders refused is become the headstone of the corner. Who is it that the builders refused? Who is it that was refused by this world in his first trip here, in his first advent? Of course, Jesus Christ. He was crucified. If you can't pick up that Jesus Christ is who is being referred to in Psalms 118, you can hopefully pick it up when it's also documented in Acts chapter 4, when Peter confirmed that the stone that the builders rejected, that became the chief cornerstone, that was crucified and resurrected, was Jesus Christ, is Jesus Christ. And so he is the stone cut without hands that smashes this image. Back to Daniel chapter 2, verse 35. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold, the whole thing, broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away. Gone with the wind, that system completely destroyed, done away with for one and all times. That no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Let me ask you something. Is that difficult to understand? I certainly hope not. You know, God many times, many places does use imagery, but he almost always explains it. And in this case, an explanation, though, or an interpretation, should not be that difficult. I just hopefully documented for all of you that this stone that comes and smashes this image, which is to say, and again, we'll get further into this chapter, the toes are the one world system of the latter days, of the end times, of the tribulation. That Christ will come and destroy that, and destroy everything that led up to that that allowed that to come to pass. But Christ is that stone that comes and smashes the system. And Christ, inasmuch as he is that stone that smashes it, he also, when it says becomes a great mountain, which you can say becomes a great nation or a great kingdom, and fills the whole earth, which is to say that the one world system of Antichrist will be in effect until Christ returns at the seventh trump, immediately destroys that kingdom, that one world system, and sets up his own reign for 1,000 years here on earth. It's not, hopefully, not hard to figure out, to comprehend. It's something that should be very easy to understand. 36, this is the dream, and we will tell you the interpretation thereof before the king. And again, so here, God, good enough to explain what this dream means, not only to Nebuchadnezzar, but to you and me today. Verse 37, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. Now, does that say that Nebuchadnezzar went out and acquired all that on his own? No, God gave it to him. Verse 38, And wheresoever the children of men dwell, in other words, a one-world system at that time, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So in other words, the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar, is Babylon during the Babylonian kingdom of Daniel's day that took Judah captive. And so it is that as it is written in Jeremiah chapter 27, again to recap, that God said Nebuchadnezzar was his servant, that he would use Nebuchadnezzar to, much as he will use Antichrist in the very, I believe, very near future, he used Nebuchadnezzar to test, to try, to correct his children at that time. And so he will use Antichrist to test, to try, to correct his children during the tribulation. And at the same time, God gave Nebuchadnezzar authority. He gave, or will give, Satan authority as Antichrist. But there are limits, certainly, that will be put on Satan as well, primarily and chiefly. He cannot physically harm, and as far as that goes, cannot even spiritually harm, I don't believe, God's election. But he certainly cannot physically harm them. He will try to convert them, but he can't harm them. Verse 39. Again, keep in mind, though, historically what we're going to find is you're going to have a kingdom, followed by a kingdom, followed by a kingdom, followed by a kingdom, and then, if I have my count right, even followed by a kingdom. But these are kingdoms that come in stages, and quite frankly, they're kingdoms that have influence and control over God's people at that time, and over the geographic location of Jerusalem at that time, or what was Judah at that time, where Judah was located. And in that sense, it will always be basically a one-world system, more or less, because, and certainly during this time, people only dealt with the known world, the area that they inhabited, that to them was the entire world. But the first king, the head of this image, was Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 39, And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. So again, these are all basically one-world systems. Nebuchadnezzar had one with Babylon. What followed him was the kingdom of Medo-Persia, and that was weaker than Nebuchadnezzar's. In fact, of course, Cyrus, who was king of Medo-Persia, would allow Judah and those who claimed to be Judah, or who bound themselves to Judah, which were Kenite Nethinims, but Cyrus of Medo-Persia would allow Judah to return back to their homeland, to Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple as documented, as told in Ezra, and to rebuild the walls of that city as documented, as told in Nehemiah. But you had, again, Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. You had Medo-Persia. The third kingdom that would follow would be Greece under Alexander the Great. Verse 40, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And the fourth kingdom historically was the Roman kingdom under Caesar and others. And historically as well, and we're going to get prophetic here, or look at this prophetically, but historically the fifth kingdom that would come after Rome would be the kingdom of Mohammedans, or Arabs, or Muslims. And certainly you had Ottoman rule and Muslim rule over much of the world for quite a lengthy period of time. Verse 41, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. In other words, and again, you can look at this as Muslims historically, and you do have division amongst even the Muslim people, where you have, certainly, to put it in modern day terms, you have Shiites and Sunni Muslims that oftentimes fight against each other even. But in prophetic terms, and even still somewhat in modern day, as you get into globalism, as you get into one-worldism, as you get into a one-world political system, you have elements that, although man and although the Kenites and the globalists, if you will and are endeavoring to put that together, you have elements. Iron and clay do not mix. And you have elements in this world today that will not mix very well at all. Differences in governmental systems, differences in religious belief. You have America that is a republic, or a Republican democracy, or democratic republic. You have other nations that are communistic or socialistic. You have nations that are Christian nations. You have nations that are Muslim nations. You have nations that are atheistic nations. And so with those you have differences of opinion, differences of philosophy, rather extreme in some cases. And so basically, in man trying to put together a one-world system, they'll never really get it quite right or put together completely. That's why it will sustain a deadly wound, and it'll take someone or something supernatural to truly get everyone on board, and to keep everyone on board, at least for a period of time, and that will be Satan in his role as Antichrist, or instead of Christ, who will come. He'll heal the deadly wound, the head wound that happens to that system, and he'll then become king, ruler, false Messiah over the entire system and over the entire world. Anybody who is deceived into believing him, into worshiping him and following him. But again, point being that iron and clay and elements just will not mix. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Again, they never really get the whole thing to come together as they would perhaps like. And so it is that you have nations today, of course, that are very strong. You have nations that perhaps are on board with being in a globalistic system that also are quite weak. And again, just that very much the case today. Verse 43, And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay or muddy clay,